The war had been going on for almost 2 years. Humanity was losing badly. The Valdrine Empire had ships that looked like they were made of glass and crystal, but they were stronger than anything humans had ever built. Their weapons could destroy entire fleets in seconds. They had been pushing closer and closer to Earth, and everyone knew that if something did not change soon, humanity would be wiped out. But then something unexpected happened. A small group of human fighters managed to destroy one of the Valdrine command ships, using a trick no one had ever tried before. They flew their damaged vessels straight into the enemy ship's power core, sacrificing themselves to save thousands of others. The Valdrine were shocked. They had never seen anyone fight like that before. For the first time in the war, they agreed to talk instead of fight. That was how Jake Morrison ended up on a diplomatic vessel in neutral space, wearing his best uniform and trying not to look as nervous as he felt. He was 22 years old, the youngest person in the entire military escort. He sat in the back row of the assembly hall behind all the important people. There were admirals, generals, and commanders who had fought in dozens of battles. Jake had only been in one real fight, and he had barely survived it. He did not understand why he was even there. His commander had told him it was because of his perfect service record, but Jake suspected it was just because they needed bodies to fill out the security detail. He was not supposed to do anything important. He was just supposed to stand there and look professional. The room was huge and cold. The walls were made of some kind of metal that reflected light in strange ways. There were about 30 humans in total, and they all looked tense. Everyone knew how important this meeting was. If the peace talks failed, the war would start again, and this time humanity might not survive. Admiral Catherine Boyd stood at the front of the human delegation. She was a tall woman with gray hair and a face that never showed emotion. She had been fighting the Valdrine longer than anyone else and had more experience with them than any other human alive. Next to her stood Commander Helen Price, who was in charge of fleet operations. Colonel Vincent Shaw was there too, along with other high-ranking officers whose names Jake could barely remember. Then the Valdrine arrived. Jake had seen pictures and videos of them before, but seeing them in person was completely different. They appeared in a flash of light that made his eyes hurt. When the light faded, there were about a dozen of them standing in the center of the room. They were tall, much taller than humans, with long limbs and graceful movements. Their skin changed colors slowly, shifting between purple and blue like oil on water. Their eyes were large and almond-shaped, glowing with an inner light. But the one who caught everyone's attention was the princess. She stood in the center of her group, and even among her own people she stood out. She wore armor that seemed to be made of pure light, shifting and flowing like water. Her skin was a deeper purple than the others, and her eyes were bright amber, like honey held up to the sun. She moved with absolute confidence, like someone who had never doubted herself in her entire life. Admiral Boyd stepped forward and began the formal greeting. She spoke carefully, using the words that the diplomats had practiced for weeks. But before she could finish, Princess Laraxa raised one hand and everyone fell silent. The princess spoke in perfect English, with only a slight musical quality to her voice. "We have reviewed your warriors' combat records. Your species fights with a strength we have rarely encountered. You are reckless, perhaps, but effective." She began walking slowly along the line of human officers. She looked at each one carefully, studying their faces, their posture, the medals on their uniforms. Jake watched her move down the line, getting closer and closer to where he stood. He told himself that she would barely glance at him. He was not important enough for her to notice, but when she reached him, she stopped. Princess Laraxa circled around him slowly, looking at him from every angle. Jake kept his eyes forward and tried not to move. He could feel everyone in the room staring at him. His heart was beating so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. He had no idea what was happening or what he was supposed to do. Finally, the princess stopped in front of him. She was so tall that he had to look up to meet her eyes. Those amber eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel like she could see right through him. "This one," Princess Laraxa said, pointing directly at Jake. "Tell me about this warrior." Admiral Boyd looked confused. "Lieutenant Morrison is part of the security detail, Your Highness. Perhaps you would prefer to speak with our senior officers. They have much more experience and knowledge." "I did not ask about your senior officers." The princess's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "This one interests me. I claim him as my personal guard for the duration of these negotiations." The room exploded with whispers. The other Valdrine looked surprised. One of them, an older male with darker skin, leaned close to the princess and began speaking quickly in their own language. But Laraxa waved him away without looking at him. Commander Price stepped forward carefully. "Your Highness, with all respect, Lieutenant Morrison is very junior. He has limited combat experience. He would not be suitable for protecting someone of your importance. His record states he survived the Battle of Titan's Gate," Princess Laraxa said, still looking at Jake. "Where his entire squad was killed, yet he managed to destroy 3 of our fighters with nothing but a damaged rifle and his own determination. That is not limited experience. That is resourcefulness. That is courage. That is exactly what I require." Jake felt his mouth go dry. The Battle of Titan's Gate was something he tried not to think about. He had lost everyone he knew that day. His friends, his squad leader, everyone. He had survived only because he had been too stubborn to die. He did not think of himself as brave. He thought of himself as lucky. "Ma'am, I mean your Highness," Jake finally managed to speak. "I am honored, but I am really not the right person for this. There are many others who would serve you better." Princess Laraxa tilted her head slightly, studying him. "It is decided. This is my condition for the peace talks to continue. The young one belongs to me now." Admiral Boyd looked like she wanted to argue, but she could not. Everyone knew that if the princess walked away, the war would start again. Millions of people would die. Compared to that, what did it matter if one junior officer was reassigned? "Very well, Your Highness," Admiral Boyd said through tight lips. "Lieutenant Morrison will serve as your personal guard." The princess smiled, though it was not a warm smile. "Excellent. He will come with me to my ship immediately. He may bring his personal belongings, but nothing more." Everything happened very fast after that. Jake was pulled aside by Commander Price, who looked at him with an expression he could not read. "This is highly irregular, Lieutenant. We do not know what she wants with you. Be careful. Remember that you are representing all of humanity now." Jake nodded, though he felt like he was in a dream. This could not be real. Things like this did not happen to people like him. He was given 20 minutes to pack his things. He did not have much. Some clothes, a few personal items, a picture of his family back on Earth. He stuffed everything into a bag and was escorted back to the assembly hall. Princess Laraxa was waiting for him. "Come," she said simply. "We have much to discuss." She turned and walked toward the airlock where her ship was docked. Her guards fell in around her, and Jake followed because he had no other choice. He looked back once at the other humans. Admiral Boyd watched him go with a troubled expression. Commander Price gave him a small nod. Then Jake stepped through the airlock and into the Valdrine ship, and everything he knew changed forever. The interior of the ship was like nothing he had ever seen. The walls glowed softly with their own light. The air smelled like flowers he could not name. Everything was smooth and curved, with no sharp edges anywhere. It was beautiful and alien, and more than a little frightening. Princess Laraxa led him through several corridors until they reached a large door that opened silently at her approach. "These will be your quarters," she said. "You will stay here when you are not attending to your duties." Jake stepped inside and stopped. The room was bigger than his entire apartment back on Earth. The walls seemed to change color as he looked at them, shifting from blue to green to purple. "Why me?" Jake asked, turning to face the princess. "You could have chosen anyone." "Why did you pick me?" Princess Laraxa looked at him for a long moment. "Because you do not yet know how to hide what you feel. Your leaders speak carefully, revealing nothing. But you? When you look at us, I see curiosity, not fear. When I mentioned Titan's Gate, I saw grief for your fallen comrades, not pride in your survival. These things cannot be faked, and they cannot be taught." She moved closer to him. "I will tell you the truth, Jake Morrison. My people are dying, not from your weapons, but from something your species has that we do not. I need to understand what that is, and I believe you can help me." Before Jake could respond, she turned and left, and he was alone in a room on an alien ship, wondering what he had gotten himself into. Jake did not sleep well that first night. The bed was comfortable, almost too comfortable, like sleeping on a cloud. But every time he closed his eyes, he kept thinking about where he was and what had happened. He was on an alien ship claimed by an alien princess for reasons he still did not fully understand. His whole life had changed in less than an hour. When morning came, or at least what he assumed was morning since there were no windows to show the sun, A soft chime sounded. Before Jake could say anything, the door opened and Princess Lyraxa walked in. She had dismissed her guards and was alone. Jake jumped to his feet, still wearing the clothes he had slept in. "Your Highness, I was not expecting you." "You may speak freely here," Lyraxa said, settling into a chair that seemed to grow out of the floor. "This room is shielded. No one can hear what we say." Jake remained standing, not sure what to do. The princess gestured to another chair that formed across from her. Slowly, he sat down. "You asked me yesterday why I chose you," Lyraxa began. "I will give you the complete answer now. My people, the Valdrine, have been the most powerful force in this part of space for 10,000 years. We have conquered dozens of worlds. Our technology is far beyond most species. Our military has never been defeated until we met your kind." She paused, and her amber eyes seemed to dim slightly. "But that power has made us weak in ways we did not understand. We have become comfortable. We follow old rules written by generals who died thousands of years ago. We do not change because we have never needed to change. And now we are paying the price." Jake listened carefully, trying to understand. "You mean because humans fight differently than you expected?" "Exactly," Lyraxa said. "Every battle we have fought against your species has been a lesson in how unprepared we are for an enemy that does not follow the rules. You turn mining equipment into weapons. You sacrifice yourself for complete strangers. You keep fighting even when every logical calculation says you should surrender. We do not understand this. We do not know how to respond to it." She leaned forward. "My father, the Emperor, wants to destroy your entire species. He believes you are too dangerous to be allowed to exist. But I convinced him to try negotiation first. I told him that perhaps we could learn from you instead of simply killing you. That is why I am here. And that is why you chose me?" Jake asked. "To learn from me?" "Yes, I do not want you as a guard, Jake Morrison. I want you as a teacher. I want you to help me understand how humans think, how you make decisions, what drives you to do the impossible." She stood up and walked to a wall that suddenly became transparent, showing the stars beyond. "If I can understand this, perhaps I can save both our peoples from destroying each other." Over the next few days, Jake found himself living in a strange new routine. Princess Lyraxa would summon him several times each day to attend the peace negotiations between the humans and Valdrine. He would stand behind her chair, watching and listening as diplomats from both sides argued about territory, resources, and terms of surrender. But the real conversations happened afterward, when Lyraxa would bring him back to her private chambers and ask him questions for hours. She wanted to know everything about human culture, human history, human psychology. Why did human soldiers form such strong bonds with their squad mates? How could humans continue fighting after losing all hope? What made someone willing to die for people they had never met? Jake did his best to answer, but it was hard. Many of the things she asked about were things he had never really thought about before. They were just normal to him. Trying to explain them to someone from a completely different culture was like trying to explain what the color blue looked like to someone who had never seen. In return, Jake learned about the Valdrine. Their society was built on strict rules and ancient traditions that could not be questioned. Every Valdrine knew their place from birth. There were nobles, soldiers, workers, and scholars, and you stayed in the role you were born into. Change was viewed as dangerous. New ideas were suspicious. Innovation was rare because the old ways had always worked before. "Your empire sounds very organized," Jake said carefully one evening. "But does not it get boring? Doing things the same way for thousands of years?" Lyraxa looked at him with an expression he could not read. "Boring, perhaps, but also stable. Safe. When everyone knows their role and follows the rules, society functions smoothly. There is no chaos, no confusion, no conflict. But there is also no growth," Jake pointed out. "Humans are messy and disorganized, and we argue all the time. But that is also how we come up with new ideas. Someone tries something different, and if it works, everyone else starts doing it too. We get better because we are willing to change." The princess was quiet for a long moment. "That is what frightens my father. Your capacity for change. He believes that if we allow your species to survive, you will spread this chaos throughout the galaxy. Other species will see your example and start questioning their own rulers. The order that has maintained peace for millennia will collapse." "Is peace through force really peace?" Jake asked. Lyraxa's eyes flashed. "Be careful, human. You speak of things you do not fully understand. The Valdrine Empire has brought stability to countless worlds. Without us, this entire region of space would descend into war and suffering." Jake realized he had pushed too far. I apologize, Your Highness. I did not mean disrespect. I am just trying to understand your perspective. The princess took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was calmer.
No, you are right to question.
That is part of why I chose you. You say things that no Valdrine would dare say to me. It is uncomfortable, but it is also valuable. As the days passed, Jake began to notice something. The peace negotiations were not going well. The human delegation refused to accept terms that would make Earth a colony of the Valdrine Empire. The Valdrine delegation refused to accept anything less than total human submission. Both sides were becoming more angry and less willing to compromise. One afternoon, Jake was standing behind Princess Lyraxa's chair when Admiral Boyd stood up and spoke in a firm voice. We cannot accept these terms. Humanity will not become slaves no matter the cost. If the only choice is between surrender and death, we choose death. The lead Valdrine negotiator, a stern male named Lord Carvax, responded coldly. Then you choose extinction. Our fleet will reduce your planet to ash. Then we will take as many of you with us as we can, Admiral Boyd replied. The meeting ended badly, with both sides returning to their ships. Jake followed Princess Lyraxa back to her quarters, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw something in her expression that looked like fear. We are running out of time, she said quietly. If these talks fail, my father will send the full Imperial fleet, every ship, every weapon, everything we have. He will not stop until every human is dead. And humans will fight to the last person, Jake said. We do not know how to surrender. It is not in our nature. Lyraxa turned to look at him. Then what do we do? How do we find a solution when both sides would rather die than compromise? Jake thought about everything he had learned over the past weeks. About Valdrine culture and human stubbornness. About fear and pride and the terrible weight of trying to save two entire species from destroying each other. Maybe we are asking the wrong question, he said slowly. Everyone is arguing about who wins and who loses. But what if there does not have to be a winner and a loser? What if there is a third option? What option? Lyraxa asked. Partnership, not one side conquering the other, but both sides working together. You said your people need to learn how to adapt and change. Humans need advanced technology and knowledge. What if we traded? Valdrine officers serve on human ships. Human officers serve on Valdrine ships. A cultural exchange. Over time, we stop being enemies and start being allies. The princess shook her head. The Emperor would never agree. It is too much change too quickly. It goes against everything our society is built on. Then start small, Jake pressed. Make it personal first. You and me. We have been doing this for weeks now. This exchange of knowledge. Make it official. Let me serve as your advisor. Show your father that a human can be loyal to a Valdrine. That we can work together. If it succeeds, maybe others will follow. Eventually, it becomes normal. Lyraxa studied him for a long time. You would do this? Leave your people, your military, everything you know? You would bind yourself to me and to the empire that has killed so many of your fellow humans? Jake thought about his squad, the people who had died at Titan's Gate. He thought about Earth and his family and everything he would be giving up. But he also thought about the billions of people who would die if the war continued. If it stops the war? Yes, I will do it. The princess moved closer to him. You need to understand what you are offering. In Valdrine culture, such bonds are sacred and permanent. If I accept you as my sworn advisor, you become mine in every way. You would be bound to me until one of us dies. You could not change your mind later. You could not go home if you got lonely or scared. You would belong to me completely. Jake felt the weight of what she was saying. This was not just a job assignment. This was a commitment that would define the rest of his life. But he had already made his choice. I understand, he said firmly, and I accept. The Emperor's response came faster than anyone expected. Within 12 hours of Princess Lyraxa submitting her proposal, a message arrived from the Imperial homeworld. The Emperor would agree to the cultural exchange program, but with strict conditions. If the experiment failed, if Jake betrayed the princess or proved unable to adapt to Valdrine society, the Empire would consider it proof that humans were too dangerous and unpredictable to be allowed to exist. The entire fate of Earth now rested on the shoulders of one 22-year-old lieutenant. Jake stood in Princess Lyraxa's quarters, reading the message on a display that floated in the air. His hands were shaking slightly. So if I mess this up, my entire species dies? Yes, Lyraxa said bluntly. My father is testing both of us. He wants to see if a human can truly adapt to our ways or if your nature makes it impossible. He is also testing me, to see if I have the strength to guide you properly. We both carry this burden now. Jake sat down heavily. The weight of it was almost too much to process. Every mistake he made, every cultural error, every moment of weakness could be used as evidence that humanity should be destroyed. I do not know if I can do this. You can, Lyraxa said firmly. You survived when your entire squad died. You adapted then and you will adapt now. But you need to understand what you are facing. Valdrine society is complex and unforgiving. Things that seem minor to you may be grave insults to us. You will need to learn quickly and perfectly. She moved to a panel on the wall and touched it. The room filled with holographic images showing Valdrine cities, ceremonies, military formations. We begin your real education now. You have 6 days before we arrive at the Imperial homeworld. In that time you must learn our language fluently, our customs perfectly, and our military protocols completely. It is not enough time, but it is all we have. What followed were the most intense 6 days of Jake's life. He slept only a few hours each night. The rest of the time was spent in constant study. Lyraxa brought in tutors, language specialists, and cultural experts. They drilled him relentlessly on everything from how to properly greet different ranks of nobility to the 17 different ways to show respect during formal ceremonies. The Valdrine language was particularly difficult. It was not just words, but tone and body position and the way you held your hands. The same sentence could mean completely different things depending on how you stood while saying it. Jake made mistakes constantly at first, accidentally saying insulting things when he meant to be polite. But slowly, painfully, he began to improve. The hardest part was the military training. Valdrine combat techniques were nothing like human ones. They relied on grace and precision rather than speed and aggression. Jake had to unlearn everything he knew about fighting and start over. His instructor was a stern female warrior named Commander Vel, who showed no patience for his errors. Again, Vel would say coldly each time Jake failed to execute a move correctly. A human child could do better. Again. By the 3rd day, Jake's entire body ached from the training. He had bruises on top of bruises. But he was getting better. His movements became smoother. His language skills improved. He started to understand the subtle signals that Valdrine used to communicate without words. On the 4th day, Princess Lyraxa took him to observe a meeting of her senior officers. This was a test, she explained. He needed to stand properly, speak only when appropriate, and show the correct level of deference to each rank. One mistake would be noticed and reported to the Emperor. Jake stood behind Lyraxa's chair, exactly 1 step back and to her right, as protocol demanded. The officers discussed military strategy, using terms and concepts that Jake barely understood. He kept his face neutral and his posture perfect exactly as he had been taught. When one officer asked him a direct question about human tactics, Jake answered clearly and concisely, making sure to acknowledge the officer's superior rank before speaking. When the meeting ended, Lyraxa nodded slightly. That was all, but Jake knew it meant he had done well. On the 6th day, they arrived at the Imperial homeworld. Jake stood at a viewport looking down at a planet that seemed to glow with its own light. Cities stretched across entire continents connected by streams of light that must have been transportation networks. Ships of every size moved through the atmosphere like schools of fish. It was beautiful and terrifying. That is the heart of the Valdrine Empire, Lyraxa said, standing beside him. Home to 15 billion of my people. Most of them will hate you on sight simply for being human. You must prove them wrong. Jake swallowed hard. No pressure, right? Actually, there is enormous pressure, Lyraxa said, missing his attempt at humor. But I believe you are ready. Remember everything you have learned. Trust your training, and stay close to me at all times. The landing ceremony was elaborate and formal. Jake wore new armor that had been made for him, designed to look similar to Valdrine military dress but adapted for his human body. He walked 3 steps behind Princess Lyraxa as they descended the ramp, keeping his eyes forward and his movements precise. The Imperial Palace was waiting for them. It was a massive structure that seemed to be carved from a single crystal, rising hundreds of feet into the air. Thousands of Valdrine had gathered to witness the arrival of the princess and her human advisor. Jake could feel their eyes on him, could sense their hostility. To them, he was a representative of the enemy species that had dared to resist the Empire. They were led through corridors that were wider than any building Jake had ever been in. Everything was made of the same crystalline material, which glowed softly and changed colors as they passed. Finally, they reached a massive door that opened to reveal the throne room. The Emperor sat on a raised platform at the far end of the room. He was larger than any Valdrine Jake had seen, with skin that was almost black and eyes that glowed bright gold. Power radiated from him like heat from a fire. Surrounding him were dozens of advisors and guards, all watching Jake with expressions that ranged from curiosity to open contempt. Princess Lyraxa moved forward with Jake following exactly as protocol demanded. When they reached the proper distance from the throne, Lyraxa placed her right hand over her heart and bowed her head. Jake did the same, making sure his movement was identical to hers. "Daughter," the Emperor said, his voice deep and resonant, "you return with your pet human. Rise and present him." Lyraxa straightened. "Father, I present Lieutenant Jake Morrison of Earth. He has sworn to serve me as advisor and has begun learning our ways. I ask your permission to continue his education and integration into our society." The Emperor's golden eyes fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he had been trained for this. He met the Emperor's gaze steadily, showing respect but not fear. "Step forward, human," the Emperor commanded. Jake moved forward 3 paces, exactly as he had practiced. He kept his posture straight and his hands at his sides in the position of respectful attention. "You are young," the Emperor observed, "barely more than a child by either of our species' standards. Yet my daughter believes you can bridge the gap between our peoples. Tell me why you agreed to this. Speak truth, for I will know if you lie." Jake took a breath. This was the moment everything depended on. "Your Majesty, I agreed because I want to prevent more death. My species and yours have been killing each other for 2 years. Good people on both sides have died. If there is any chance to stop that, I have to try, even if I am not sure I can succeed." "A noble sentiment," the Emperor said, "but sentiment is cheap. What makes you think you are capable of this task? You have no diplomatic training, no experience with other cultures, no special skills that would qualify you. You are simply a soldier who survived one battle." "That is true, Your Majesty," Jake agreed. "I am not special, but maybe that is why this can work. I am not trying to be a diplomat or a politician. I am just trying to understand your daughter and your people, and I am willing to change, to learn, to become something different than what I was. That is all I can offer." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Princess Lyraxa. "And you believe this is enough? You stake your reputation and your position on this human." "I do, Father," Lyraxa said firmly. "I believe he has the capacity to succeed. I ask for 1 year to prove it." 1 year, the Emperor repeated. He looked back at Jake. "Very well. You will have your chance, human. But understand this. You are being watched constantly. Every action, every word, every gesture will be analyzed. The moment you prove yourself unworthy, the moment you betray us or fail in your duties, your species will pay the price. Do you accept this burden?" "I do, Your Majesty," Jake said. "Then begin," the Emperor said. "Show us if humans are capable of true adaptation, or if you are simply clever animals playing at civilization." The dismissal was clear. Lyraxa bowed again and Jake mirrored her movement. They retreated from the throne room, walking backward for the required 30 paces before turning around. Once they were out of the throne room and in a private corridor, Lyraxa let out a breath. "That went as well as could be expected. My father did not reject you outright, which is something." "He really hates humans," Jake said quietly. "He fears them," Lyraxa corrected. "Fear and hate are often the same thing. But you did well. Your posture was correct." The next 3 months were the hardest of Jake's life. Every day brought new challenges, new tests, new ways he could fail and doom his entire species. He woke before dawn each morning for combat training with Commander Vel. Then came language lessons, cultural studies, and strategy sessions. He attended court functions where noble Valdrine watched him like predators studying prey, waiting for him to make a mistake they could report to the Emperor. But slowly, painfully, Jake began to adapt. His Valdrine language became fluent enough that he could understand the subtle insults hidden in polite conversation. His combat skills improved until Commander Vel actually nodded in approval one morning. He learned to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined imperial politics. Princess Lyraxa was always there, guiding him, correcting his errors, pushing him to be better. She was a demanding teacher, never satisfied with good enough. But Jake was starting to understand why. She was not just teaching him to survive in Valdrine society. She was teaching him to thrive, to become someone who could genuinely bridge the gap between their peoples. The real test came during a session of the Imperial War Council. Jake had been attending these meetings for weeks, always standing silently behind Lyrax's chair, listening and learning. The council was where the Empire's highest military commanders discussed strategy and policy. It was also where Lord Carvax, the supreme military commander, made his contempt for Jake's presence known at every opportunity. Carvax was everything Jake had learned to fear about the Valdrine military. He was ancient, powerful, and absolutely convinced that humans were nothing more than clever animals. He had fought in hundreds of battles over his long life, and saw the war with humanity as a minor inconvenience that should have been ended quickly. This particular morning, the council was discussing recent skirmishes on the frontier. Several Valdrine ships had been damaged by human forces using new tactics that no one had anticipated. Carvax was furious about it. "This is what happens when we show mercy," he declared, his voice cutting through the room. "The humans use our willingness to negotiate as an opportunity to develop new weapons and strategies. We should have destroyed them when we had the chance." One of the other commanders nodded. "Their unpredictability makes them dangerous. They do not fight according to any logical pattern. It is like fighting against chaos itself." Jake listened, forcing himself to remain silent as protocol demanded. Junior advisors did not speak in council meetings unless directly addressed. But he could feel the anger building inside him. They were talking about his people like they were some kind of disease that needed to be eliminated. "Perhaps that is why they continue to survive," another voice said. It was General Thane, one of the few commanders who had shown Jake any respect. "We call their tactics chaotic, but maybe we simply do not understand the pattern." Different does not mean inferior. Carvax turned to glare at Thane. "Are you suggesting we have something to learn from these primitives? They have been in space for less than a century. We have been perfecting warfare for 10,000 years. And yet they continue to damage our ships and evade our fleets," Thane pointed out calmly. The argument continued, with various commanders taking sides. Jake watched Princess Lyraxa carefully. Her expression remained neutral, but he had learned to read the small signs. The slight tightening around her eyes meant she was preparing for something. Then Carvax made his move. He turned toward where Jake stood and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Perhaps we should ask the princess's pet human. After all, he is here as an advisor, is he not? Tell us, creature, what brilliant human strategy should we use against your own people?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Jake. This was a trap, and everyone knew it. If he refused to answer, he would appear weak and useless. If he gave advice that helped the Valdrine fight humans, he would be a traitor. If he gave bad advice, he would prove Carvax's point that humans could not be trusted. Jake met Carvax's gaze steadily. He had known this moment would come eventually. The Supreme Commander had been waiting for an opportunity to humiliate him publicly. Now he had it. "Supreme Commander," Jake said, using the proper formal address. "I am honored that you value my opinion. May I speak plainly?" Carvax smiled coldly. "By all means. Enlighten us with your wisdom." Jake took a breath and chose his words carefully. "You are correct that my people fight in ways that seem chaotic to you. But it is not chaos. It is adaptation. Humans do not have a 10,000-year military tradition to guide us. Every battle is new, every situation unique. So we improvise. We try things that have never been tried before. Sometimes we fail spectacularly, but sometimes we succeed in ways that surprise everyone, including ourselves." He paused, then continued. "You said I should tell you what strategy to use against my people. But that is the wrong question, Supreme Commander. The right question is, why are we still fighting at all? You have superior technology, superior numbers, superior experience. By every logical measure, you should have won this war in the first month, but you did not. Do you know why?" The room was absolutely silent now. Jake could see Princess Lyraxa's eyes widen slightly. He was taking a huge risk, but he had to make them understand. "Because humans will never surrender," Jake said. "Not because we are brave or stupid, but because we do not know how. Our history is filled with smaller forces defeating larger ones through sheer determination. We have lost battles, lost wars, been conquered and enslaved, but we always come back. Always. You can destroy Earth, kill every human alive, but the idea of humanity will survive, and that idea will inspire others to resist you. Carvax's expression had gone cold and dangerous. You dare threaten the Empire? No, Supreme Commander, Jake said quickly.
I am trying to explain reality.
You asked for my honest assessment. Here it is, you cannot win this war through military force alone. You can kill us all, but the cost will be enormous and the example will spread. Other species will see what we did and wonder if they can do it too. Or you can accept Princess Lyrax's proposal. You can try to understand us, work with us, and show the galaxy that the Valdrine Empire is strong enough to make allies instead of just creating subjects. The silence stretched out. Jake could feel his heart pounding. He had just said things that no Valdrine would ever dare say to the Supreme Commander. He might have just signed Earth's death warrant. Then Carvax did something unexpected. He laughed. It was not a warm laugh, but it was genuine. Bold words from a junior advisor who should be silent. You have courage, human, I will grant you that. Foolish courage, perhaps, but courage nonetheless. He stood and walked toward Jake slowly. Jake forced himself not to step back, to hold his ground even though every instinct screamed at him to run. Tell me, pet, Carvax said quietly, do you truly believe your people could continue to resist us indefinitely? I believe they would try, Supreme Commander, Jake said honestly. Whether they would succeed is another question. But yes, they would try. Carvax studied him for a long moment. Then he turned back to the rest of the council. An interesting perspective. The human speaks with more honesty than most of my own officers. That is either refreshing or deeply concerning, I am not sure which. He returned to his seat. Very well, Princess. Your experiment continues. But know that I am watching. One sign of betrayal, one hint of treachery, and I will personally ensure this creature and his entire species pay the price. Understood, Supreme Commander. Princess Lyraxa said formally. I accept full responsibility for Jake Morrison's conduct and loyalty. The council meeting continued, but the tension had shifted. Several commanders who had ignored Jake before now glanced at him with something that might have been respect. General Thane gave him a small nod of approval. After the meeting ended, Lyraxa pulled Jake aside into a private chamber. For a moment, she just looked at him. Then she spoke. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I have ever witnessed. You directly challenged the Supreme Commander of the Imperial Military in front of the entire War Council. I know, Jake said. I am sorry if I embarrassed you. Embarrassed me? Lyraxa shook her head. You impressed them. Carvax respects strength even from those he considers inferior. You stood your ground and spoke truth to power. That is something very few Valdrine would do. She moved to a window overlooking the city. You are starting to understand us, Jake Morrison. Not just our language and customs, but the deeper truth. The Valdrine Empire is built on strength, but also on respect. You cannot demand respect from my people. You must earn it. And today you took a significant step toward earning it. Does that mean things will get easier? Jake asked hopefully. Lyraxa smiled slightly. No, it means they will get harder. Now that you have proven you are not worthless, others will test you more severely. They will want to see if your courage was real or just a lucky moment. You will have to prove yourself again and again. Over the following months, Jake did exactly that. He attended more council meetings and offered insights that helped the Valdrine understand human tactics. He trained with Valdrine warriors and learned to hold his own against opponents who were stronger and faster than any human. He studied Valdrine history and philosophy until he could discuss complex concepts. Nearly 1 year had passed since Princess Lyraxa had pointed at Jake and declared him hers. In that time, Jake had transformed from a nervous young lieutenant into someone who moved through the imperial court with confidence. He spoke Valdrine as fluently as he spoke English. He understood their customs, their military doctrine, their complex political structures, but he had not forgotten where he came from or why he was there. The cultural exchange program had expanded beyond just Jake. 50 human volunteers now served aboard Valdrine vessels, learning their technology and methods. An equal number of Valdrine observers had been assigned to human ships. It was a small start, but it was working. Reports came back of successful cooperation, of humans and Valdrine learning to work together despite their differences. But not everyone was happy about it. There were still traditionalists on both sides who viewed the exchange program as dangerous. Some humans saw the volunteers as traitors. Some Valdrine saw them as threats to their way of life. The experiment remained fragile, always one incident away from falling apart. That incident came on a quiet morning when Jake was reviewing tactical reports in Princess Lyraxa's strategy room. An urgent message arrived from a remote colony world called Helix 7. Pirates were attacking a settlement that housed both human and Valdrine families who had volunteered for the integration program. The colony's defenses were failing, and both the Imperial fleet and the nearest human vessels were too far away to help in time. Jake read the report with growing horror. There were children on that colony, families who had believed in the peace process enough to risk living together, and they were going to die because help could not arrive fast enough. Princess Lyraxa burst into the room moments later, having received the same report. The nearest Imperial battle group is 8 hours away. Human forces are even farther. The colony will be destroyed before anyone can reach them. What if we did not use Imperial forces alone? Jake said, an idea forming. What if we combined them? Your ships have superior firepower and shields. Our ships are faster and more maneuverable. Together we might get there in time. A joint operation? Lyraxa looked doubtful. It has never been attempted. Our fleets use different communication systems, different tactical doctrines, different command structures. The coordination required would be immense. Then we make it work, Jake said firmly. Those people down there believed in what we are trying to build. We cannot let them die because we are too afraid to try something new. Lyraxa studied him for a moment, then nodded. Very well, but you will coordinate it. You understand both human and Valdrine military thinking. If anyone can make this work, it is you. The next 6 hours were chaos. Jake worked with both human and Valdrine tactical officers to create a hybrid battle plan. The Valdrine ships would form the main battle line, using their powerful weapons to engage the pirate fleet directly. Human vessels would use their speed to flank the enemy, striking weak points and drawing fire away from the Valdrine formation. Jake himself would serve as the coordinator, translating commands between both fleets in real time. It was a plan that required perfect timing and trust between forces that had been killing each other just a year ago. If it failed, the colony would be destroyed and the cultural exchange program would likely end. Jake tried not to think about that as he strapped himself into a command chair on Princess Lyraxa's flagship. All human vessels. This is Coordinator Morrison, Jake said into the communication system, using the title that had been hastily created for him. You are cleared to jump on my mark. Follow the flight patterns we discussed. Trust your Valdrine partners to cover your weak points. They are counting on you to do the same. The human response came back, voices Jake recognized from his time serving with them. Roger that, Coordinator. We will not let you down. Jake switched to the Valdrine command channel, speaking in their language. All Imperial vessels, this is Coordinator Morrison. Execute Formation Delta on my command. Remember that the human ships will be moving faster than you are used to. Adjust your fire patterns to account for their movements. They are our allies in this fight. Understood, Coordinator, came the response from multiple Valdrine captains. Princess Lyraxa stood beside him, watching the tactical displays. You know that if this fails, the blame will fall on you. I know, Jake said. But if we do not try, those people die for certain. At least this way they have a chance. Then let us give them that chance, Lyraxa said. All ships jump on the Coordinator's mark. Jake took a deep breath and counted down. 3, 2, 1, execute jump. The universe twisted around them as both fleets entered hyperspace simultaneously. Minutes later, they emerged in orbit around Helix 7. The pirate fleet was there exactly as reported. 15 ships of various sizes, all heavily armed and attacking the colony below. All ships engage, Jake ordered. What happened next would be studied in military academies for years to come. The Valdrine battleships moved into formation with precision that came from thousands of years of practice. Their energy weapons lit up space, slamming into pirate shields with devastating force. But the pirates were experienced fighters. They began to scatter, trying to use their numbers and mobility to their advantage. That was when the human ship struck. 5 destroyers came in fast from multiple angles, firing missiles and kinetic weapons. The pirates focused on the Valdrine battleships were caught off guard. 2 pirate vessels exploded immediately. The others tried to regroup, but they were trapped between the Valdrine hammer and the human anvil. Jake coordinated the battle from his position, switching between languages and command systems so fast his head spun. Human Destroyer Group 2, swing wide and hit that cruiser from behind. Valdrine Battleship Triumph, adjust fire to support Human Group 3. Watch your spacing, people. Keep the pressure on. It was messy. It was chaotic. Pilots on both sides made mistakes that would have been criticized in any normal operation. But somehow it worked. The human ships darted and weaved, drawing pirate fire and creating openings. The Valdrine ships exploited those openings with overwhelming firepower. The pirates, expecting to fight against one doctrine or the other, could not adjust to an enemy that combined both. Within 30 minutes, the pirate fleet was destroyed or fleeing. The colony was saved. A cheer went up across both fleets. Jake heard it through the communication channels, humans and Valdrine celebrating together. He slumped back in his chair, exhausted and shaking with adrenaline. Princess Lyraxa placed her hand on his shoulder. "You did it! You actually made it work." "We did it," Jake corrected. "All of us, human and Valdrine, working together like we were always meant to." The rescue operations began immediately. Human and Valdrine forces worked side by side to evacuate the injured and repair damaged structures. Jake watched it all from the flagship, seeing something he had dreamed of but never quite believed would happen. Two species that had been at war were now acting like allies, like comrades, like friends. Reports of the successful operation spread quickly through both human and Valdrine space. The cultural exchange program expanded rapidly after that. Mixed crews became common rather than exceptional. The Emperor himself issued a statement praising the operation and calling for more cooperation between the two species. Lord Carvax, the Supreme Commander who had been so hostile to Jake, requested a private meeting. Jake expected another test, another challenge. Instead, Carvax looked at him with something close to respect. "You have proven me wrong, human," Carvax said bluntly. "I did not believe your species could truly adapt to our ways. I thought you were too chaotic, too unpredictable, too primitive. But you have shown that these qualities can be strengths rather than weaknesses. You have earned my respect, Jake Morrison. That is not something I give easily." "Thank you, Supreme Commander," Jake said, genuinely moved. "That means more than you know." 3 months later, Jake stood on a balcony overlooking the imperial capital. Princess Lyraxa joined him, looking out over the city that had become familiar to him. "It has been nearly a year and a half since I pointed at you and declared you mine," Lyraxa said quietly. "Do you regret it? Everything you gave up to be here?" Jake thought about Earth, about his family and friends he had not seen in so long. He thought about the life he could have had as a normal soldier. But he also thought about what had been accomplished. The war had not resumed. Thousands of lives had been saved. Two species were learning to work together instead of destroying each other. "No," he said honestly, "I do not regret it. This is where I was meant to be." "Doing this work?" Lyraxa smiled, a genuine expression that Jake rarely saw from her. "I told you that day that you belonged to me. I claimed you as mine and you accepted. But I have come to understand something. This bond goes both ways. I belong to you as well, Jake Morrison. We belong to each other. And through us, perhaps our peoples can belong to something greater." Jake felt the weight of her words. He had started as the youngest warrior in a military escort, someone who expected to fade into obscurity. Instead, he had become a bridge between worlds, a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. "The youngest warrior," Jake said with a slight smile, "who became something nobody expected." "You became exactly what was needed," Lyraxa corrected.